You're listening to Life, the Universe, and Everything Else. Today on the show, this podcast kills fascists. Life, the Universe, and Everything Else explores the intersection of science and society. Our music is produced by Ian James, and the show is edited by E.A. Moon. My name is Ashlyn Noble, and I'll be your host this evening. With me today, I have Lauren Bailey.
Hello.
Laura Creek Newman.
Hi there.
And Jem Newman.
Hello.
Jemothy.
I mean, it's a good podcast title.
I mean, I was just looking at the back of your computer here.
Yep.
What would you like to call the podcast instead?
No, I like it. I'll just refrain from commenting on the title further.
Okay.
Woody Guthrie would approve.
I recently gave a service at the UU Church here in Winnipeg about how to resist fascism 101. Trust me, this is the baby beginner version, but I feel like it has some utility and I wanted to reuse my homework like Jem gets to all the time. So we are doing a Fascism 101, how to spot it, how to resist it, how to be a professional in this environment. Let's get started, Lauren.
As LUEE's self-proclaimed historian, I'm here to provide a definition and a short history of fascism and a quick primer on how to spot it in the wild. For extra points, I'm going to try and do so in 2 pages or less, which I did. The word fascism is intentionally vague, and that's part of its power. It also makes defining it a nearly impossible task. Historian Ian Kershaw wrote in 2016 that trying to define fascism is like trying to nail jelly to the wall. Well, Umberto Eco, in his 1995 essay Fascism, calls it a fuzzy totalitarianism, a collage of different philosophical and political ideas, a beehive of contradictions. Eco gave that definition during a discussion of why fascism became the de facto term for totalitarianism as a movement, despite its relatively recent entry into the world lexicon. We'll get into the history in a little moment, but my pet theory is it's just a more satisfying word to say. If you're using it pejoratively, it's like the word fuck. The F and the schw sounds feel good and powerful in the mouth, and you get the hard glottal stop at the end if you're saying the word fascist, which makes it a hard and biting insult in a way that totalitarianist is just a bit too long to do. Also, of course, because it is a modern spin on an age-old ethos, developing along with global mass media in 20th century Europe, fascism is the flavor of totalitarianism that we know intimately in this day and age. The well-sourced Wikipedia article defines fascism.
I just was laughing at well-sourced.
I went through so many links, and it's a good read. No, it's a horrible read. It's an educational read. The well-sourced Wikipedia article defines fascism as a far-right, authoritarian, and ultranationalist political ideology and movement, characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interest for the perceived good of the nation or race, and strong regimentation of society and the economy. I think that's as good of a definition as we're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Like American Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart naively said about obscenity, I know it when I'll see it. Fascism is a politic based on fear. Politicians and prominent promoters rely on complacent population in whom they can whip up terror at anything new or different and then harness that terror into a calculated violence. Fascism views forms of violence as a way to rejuvenate the nation, whether political violence, imperialist violence, or flat-out war. It plays up the us versus them mentality required to hold people complacent. Fascists prefer totalitarian one-party states and market economies where the state intervenes directly with strict policies, with the principal goal of achieving national economic self-sufficiency. Fascism's extreme authoritarianism and nationalism can show up as manifest destiny, or a return to a period of imagined historical greatness. Before there was MAGA, there was Benito Mussolini wanting to restore the glory of the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
It can also foster in-group, out-group opposition, as we've all heard. In the case of Nazism, which is a subset of fascism, this involved racial purity and a master race, which blended with a variant of racism and discrimination against a demonized other. Other marginalized groups such as queer people, trans people, ethnic minorities, or immigrants are also targeted. It's a choose-your-own-demon philosophy. Bigotry motivates fascist regimes to commit rat massacres, forced sterilizations, deportations, and genocides. If you've been ticking off on your fingers how many we're seeing worldwide today, you can stop. It's all of them. Historian Stanley G. Paynes has provided an off-cited definition that focuses on three concepts. There's fascist negations, which is the anti-liberalism, anti-communism, and anti-conservatism. Fascist goals, which are the creation of a nationalist dictatorship to regulate economic structure and to transform social relations within a modern, self-determined culture, an expansion of that nation into an empire, whether it's taking over your nearest neighbor or the world.
Or Greenland. For like a lot of people, that was the one that Trump was missing for the longest time. And he certainly came out swinging with that.
Yeah. The third of Payne's concepts is fascist style, which is a political aesthetic of romantic symbolism, mass mobilization, and a positive view of violence, and promotion of masculinity, youth, and charismatic authoritarian leadership. Umberto Eco describes 14 concepts of what he calls fascism, which are similar to Payne's concepts with, of course, more nuance and definition. I really suggest reading his whole essay. It's available freely online, including in our show notes. He published it in 1995, around the same time I was starting to figure out my own political ethos. And Eco was a hell of a lot easier for this Canadian teenager to read than Marx, especially in photocopied papers passed around our little communist group of ragtag Northern Ontario dorks.
Can I ask, have you or had you read anything else by Eco?
I love In the Name of the Rose.
Yeah, Name of the Rose was my first Eco. I also really enjoyed Baudolino.
He is a better semantician than Dan Brown could ever dream to be.
Yes.
For those needing a definition, that is explainer of symbols and symbology.
Thank you.
I realize that it's a word that maybe not everybody knows.
I'm going to say most people don't, Lauren.
Yeah, true.
It has 5+ syllables and is not, yeah.
In my day-to-day life, I have to write at a 6th grade level. This is where I get to use my big words.
So you overcompensated everywhere else.
I don't have a university education. I just use university words.
You know what? University words are overrated because as you look through them, you're just like, this still says nothing, but in bigger words.
Mm-hmm. I'm a plain language advocate, except when I get on this mic.
It's my one vice!
It's late. Let me be big-worded. Fascism rose to prominence in early 20th century Europe. The first fascist movements emerged in Italy during World War I, surprising, before spreading to other European countries, especially Germany. Italian fascists, like Benito Mussolini, saw World War I as a revolution that brought massive changes to the nature of war, society, and the state. Giant war and the mass mobilization of society erased a lot of the difference between civilians and combatants, especially when it was right at their doorstep. And it created a national machine where all citizens were involved in the military in some manner, which made it really easy to whip it up into a fervor. The war resulted in the rise of a powerful state capable of mobilizing millions of people to serve on the front lines, provide logistics to support people on the front lines, and having unprecedented authority to intervene in the lives of its citizens. Between World War II and, about 10 years ago, Fascism was largely and correctly disgraced, and the term itself was used as an insult. The description...
Just remember 10 years ago was 2015. You might want to go a few more.
I was mostly talking about the prevalence of it in the rise of Trump. But
okay. Yeah, I just feel like that started maybe a little bit earlier.
It did start earlier, but...
It's upsetting to me that 2015 was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when was the Tea Party? Tea Party was like 2013, 2014?
That was before that.
Yeah.
Was it really?
That was like back in Obama days.
Obama time,
Obama's first term.
And Obama got in 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Obama was still prime minister.
Wait,
we're all very tired tonight.
Was still prime minister.
that one was on purpose. Sorry, Ashlyn. That one was on purpose, but the prime minister was not. I am very tired. When you screw up on purpose and then make a fool of yourself by screwing up unintentionally. Obama was president in 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
But yes, maybe
Tea
it was
Party
his first
movement
term.
began in 2007.
Yeah.
7.
Yeah, like it got going before he, like during that election. And I think it like continued for a while. And then after Obama's second, like his re-election, it fizzled.
petered out.
That's when
That's
Trump decided to make a big deal
You
about
probably
it.
cut all of this anyway.
It's okay.
But yeah, we're nearly at the point of 20 years since I can see Russia from my house. Can you believe that? Oh my God.
Nope.
Anyway, go on, Lauren. Tell us more about fascism.
Almost done. So we were talking about between World War II and about 20 years ago, fascism was largely incorrectly disgraced, and the term itself was an insult. The descriptions neo-fascist or post-fascist are sometimes applied to contemporary parties with ideologies similar to or rooted in the original 20th century fascist movements. Late 19th to early 20th century fascist movements. So how do we spot these fascists in the wild? In addition to your out and proud and oh-so-punchable neo-Nazis, you're going to have to look a little deeper. Proponents of fascism weasel it into our everyday lives by monopolizing media and pushing their messages by just asking questions and having concerns about X, Y, or Z. They're going to be the ones leading the book bannings because they don't want anyone to learn anything that may challenge their views, which is one of the Echo's 14 tenets is we know everything we need to know. Why do we need more and challenging books? These people are proudly and loudly talking about, we've just gone too far with this gay stuff. And in back in my day, we didn't have trans people with autism. We heard a lot of this at the legislature last week.
I once found a postcard at the Forks that had a picture of the building, but the caption was just the legislative.
Got a word there.
Yeah.
For symbols, you've got your swastikas, your Pepe the Frog, and your Futhark runes, especially Odal, which is shaped like a diamond with legs, or, coincidentally, the stage at the 2021 CPAC convention.
Or the double S rune, right?
Yeah. You have your Celtic or iron crosses, which are the ones with, like, the circle in them. Your lightning bolts, which can also be said as your double S's and your lightning bolts. Your red or white ladder-laced, steel-toed boots. You have your literal fascis, which is a bundle of sticks wrapped around an axe, which is where the name came from.
Mm-hmm.
You have your clever little inserts into language like the numbers 14 and 88, phrases like blood and honor, and blood and soil. You've got your hand signs like Elon's Sig Heil, or the white power sign that looks like you're just saying, okay. Folks, there's so many. I do have big lists of them in the show notes. Somebody else has done it. Go take a look.
Mm-hmm.
Fascists think they're oh so clever, but since the ethos has a strong anti-intellectual bias, they're really fucking not. They're clever like a 5-year-old who wipes the cookie crumbs off their face is clever. We can beat back this movement by organizing, which Ashlyn is going to talk about next, so I'll leave that to them. Final question. Is it ever okay to punch a fascist? Remember the paradox of tolerance. If a society extends tolerance to those who are intolerant, it risks enabling the eventual dominance of intolerance, thereby undermining the very principle of tolerance itself. So the final answer is yes. Repeatedly.
I mean, we've known this for decades. The way you turn a bar into a fascist bar is you don't immediately throw them out and beat the shit out of them as soon as they show up.
As soon as there is one Nazi, the rest are coming.
How many times have we used that allegory this week?
So, after I gave this service at the church on Sunday, I went over to my mother's house for a Sunday dinner. So we had delayed Easter for a week, and I was still wearing my shirt that said, "Be gay, do crime, punch Nazis." And before we left, I did acknowledge it'll be interesting to see if my mom has more of a problem with this than anybody at church. She did, in fact, wrinkle her nose and go, "What does that shirt say?" And I told her what it said. And she said, "But Ashlyn, why do you hate Germans?"
What?
Not a one-to-one correlation here.
And I lost it a little bit and went, "Mom, like, the Nazis are back. They've been back. Dad watches the news all of the time. Like, what do you mean? Why do you hate Germans? Nazis."
Even if you were just referring to, like, German Nazis, the sentiment would still...
I understand. We attempted to explain, I think, 2 other times that night that German and Nazi were not synonyms, and I'm not 100% sure we got there. But she did agree that I should punch anybody who wants me dead, so we got there.
Okay, and what baffled me was the fact that your mom had not heard the term Nazi in its grown... in its modern meaning?
She kept saying,
she has like pictures, like film reels of from 1944 or whatever in her mind. When
like all of the Nazis were eliminated before 1950, as far as she's concerned. Like when
the war ended, they all either went to jail or died, and they were just gone. And then Germany went back to being.
She kept saying, "I've just never heard anybody say that word." Like, what? Where have you been?
Lorette?
And so we actually said that same thing. Like, it has been known for a long time that you can't let a Nazi sit in your bar because then it becomes a Nazi bar. Like, so anyway, sorry, you were saying, but yes, my mother needed that education. Someone who grew up like
it's baffling.
I don't understand. This is a new low for her being under the rock. Her previous win was before our wedding when she took me out for lunch and told me with a straight face, asked me, "What are you going to call each other? Because every relationship has to have exactly one husband and exactly one wife, no matter what the orientation of the people involved."
Cool.
Yeah. Anyway, my mother needs some lessons on how to spot a Nazi.
I'm done. That was my segment. Punching Nazis was the end of it.
I
watched that Richard Spencer video like 6 times today. It was so great. I just love watching it on loop.
There was one compilation of the Richard Spencer getting punched in the face video that was set to music, and it was so good.
We can take another lesson from that. Keep your name off the goddamn internet when you're organizing against the fascists.
Because nobody ever found out who that guy was.
Still.
And I mean, he may not have been organized at all. He may just have come up and heard him talking and decided he needed to punch.
That's enough.
Just punch him.
5 words out of that guy's mouth and everybody could be like, yeah, he needs a punch. Just close the mouth.
And despite ascendant fascism, once again, at the very least, when was the last time you thought about Richard Spencer? It worked.
Or like that. Do you associate him with anything other than being punched in the face now?
Right.
Well, yes, but we are not the target audience for this.
Alrighty, so resisting all of this, where do we start? The good news is that a lot of people have been doing this work for a long time, and you don't have to start from scratch. So the minimum things to get started, in my opinion, are what do you care about? What are you willing to offer? Talk to your neighbors, and don't comply in advance. So that's where we're going to start. Those are like top 4.
That last one. We're going to talk about that a little bit too. But
excellent. What do you care about? Some of my personal top things, causes, personal projects are like food security, genocide, trans rights. I have a short list of people and things that I support and look toward for news on those things, and nobody can be perfectly informed on all issues at all times. You have to triage a little, decide what is most important, where your resources can go to. Maybe not even what's most important to you right now, but what you can have the most impact on locally might weigh the scales in that favor. Mm-hmm. Watch out for organizations and places that are organized very hierarchically. Things like nonprofits, most political campaigns, anything that there's a lot of money involved tends to be, unfortunately, common for those kinds of places to be very bad at actual community and mutual aid, and very good at burning through their volunteers to serve their mission. So you might want to look into the structure of the organization that you are joining before you get in there. But don't give up. If something that an organization is doing seems really cool, but their leadership sucks, there's probably a lot of smaller organizations that are doing the same thing with less resources that could probably use your help.
And some of the frontline people in the bigger places might be double timing it and working for the smaller stuff and can help you with it.
Mm.
Do you mind if I take this opportunity to plug the Industrial Workers of the World?
Go for it. It's also coming up later.
Oh, cool. I'm a member of the Winnipeg General Membership Branch, and it's a small GMB. Usually, we have dozens of members, but it's non-hierarchical. Good people who care about good things and put in the work.
Awesome. Speaking of work, the next item is, what are you willing to offer? The ways that you can contribute to fighting fascism are too many to number. What are you good at? What's a skill that you wish you could put to more use that you maybe don't get to use in your everyday life? Do you have lots of time? Some of us have nothing but time. Some of us have more money than time. Some of us have more skills than time. Can you make posters, run a social media account, make memes, plan an event? If you can plan a party, it's a lot like planning some sort of fundraiser event or social that could serve a greater function. Are you the kind of person who just likes to talk to people? Most of us are not those kind of people, despite sitting here and talking to you for hours every month. But leftist organizations often could use people who are extroverts, who are willing to talk to people, recruit, explain what's going on at meetings to new people. Those are things that can really help with growing the movement that perhaps we are not great at the moment. So maybe if you just want to sit in the corner and talk to people, there's a job for you. But also if you are an accountant, as we've been saying, if you are a lawyer that has some extra time on the side, if you have space that you can use to give an organization room to meet for cheap or free, that is huge. If you have the ability to print things, many organizations don't even have the ability to make flyers at this point. So if you can lend out some office supplies,
steal them from your work.
Right? Robert Evans says, most of the anarchists I know define themselves as helpers before anything else. They'll cheerfully admit they don't know how to solve the big problem, but they do know how to provide free eye exams to homeless people once a month, or do water drops down at the border so migrants don't die of dehydration, or crowdsource insulin from their friends to help that single mom through a bad week or two. If you are where we all are right now, bereft of ideas, staring down the barrel of a nightmare, those are good folks to know. Like everyone else, they're defaulting to what they've been doing, but at least what they've been doing helps people. Yeah. Just, if what you're already doing is helping people, keep doing what you're doing. Maybe expand that to some group that you're not already serving. Maybe you have a room or a couch in your house that could host a trans refugee from the States. That's probably going to be more and more necessary.
There's that meme that goes around that says, Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers. If you are an adult, you are the helper. It's time to step up.
Yeah. That advice was for children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grow up. Do the work.
So my next big point is talking to your neighbors is important. I am a terminally online introverted millennial, and random small talk on the sidewalk is not my favorite thing. But as we've talked about on the show before, I think we sort of forced ourselves into that by working on our yard for endless hours during the summer, and people just happen to stop by and say hi, and we love talking about our yards, so we get to chatting, and we've gotten to know our neighbors. Surprise! We managed to get to know a lot of our neighbors just by being outside a lot more, which was great, because the people who are physically closest to us in our built environment, if there is a crisis or a real emergency, those are the people that we are going to be able to help and who are going to be able to help us in return.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the people that we know and love that are scattered across the city that we have the ability to help in a tornado or an immediate aftermath of an earthquake or anything else. Those are the people that are closest to us. Those are the people who need to be our first community if we can make it so.
The person picking up the political sign today as I was coming out of the house, we talked about our front yard garden and how she grew up on the next street over, and that's why I was late picking you up. Well, that and traffic. But
if we want to cooperate in an emergency situation, that whole thing is going to be way less complicated if we already have a baseline of friendly interactions to build on.
Yeah.
So get to know your neighbors. A story from 2019 has been circling recently where ICE were attempting to detain some folks who were in a van outside their home. Their neighbors formed a human chain to keep ICE away from them and deliver food, water, and gasoline into the vehicle until they were able to get ICE to leave them alone. So would you do this for your neighbors? Would you want your neighbors to do that for you? You got to talk to them first. What skills do you have and enjoy using, again, that your neighbors might appreciate? Offering to share things like snow clearing duties or gardening tools goes a long way to getting to know folks, even if they don't take you up on the offer. Grow a fruit plant and share the bounty. Build a little free library, or take a stone, leave a stone spot if you have room in your yard. Connecting with your neighbors can take hundreds of forms, and just got to start somewhere.
Even just waving to the MLA who lives 2 doors down as he's standing outside awkwardly with his family.
He's more friendly in election season. All right, next one. Don't comply in advance. That's a big one. We've been hearing a lot about it lately. Marie Snyder writes, often it's perfectly fine to blindly follow rules and guidelines, but sometimes, every once in a while, it can permit atrocities to happen. From cruel conspiracies against that one person in your group who is a little different, all the way up the scale to genocidal actions. So it's absolutely vital to be able to think about the norms we follow, and from time to time to break the less useful ones, just to make sure we still can. We need to practice nonconformity to make sure we can do it when we need to. It's always wise to take a minute to think, do I really agree with this? And could it harm anyone before acting?
Mm-hmm.
Fear of looking weird is one of the strongest tools that society, and the alt-right in particular, possesses to inflict its will upon us. Because many people would literally rather die or enable harm to others than go against the grain. So first there's the smoke-filled room experiment from 1968, which a participant was placed in a room, and if they were alone and the room started to fill with smoke, they would immediately get up and tell someone and then leave. However, if the room was filled with paid actors who knew what was going on, who were told not to panic and just sit there, in 90% of cases, the participant would sit there for 20 minutes without doing anything. Because if no one else around you is panicking, it's really easy to believe that you are the one that is like somehow not seeing things correctly, and doing something that is weird would be bad and not right. In other experiments, it has taken researchers very little effort to get people to turn on one another for very small differences like eye color. Few suggestions that one group is smarter or cleaner or less violent is all it takes to start the process of othering and bullying. And you, dear listener, are not a special example of someone who cannot be influenced.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to understand that about yourself.
And then go over every single incidence of when you went with the crowd in your head before you go to sleep each night.
Maybe not.
Maybe don't do that.
Maybe don't do that. Yeah, let's not do that. My therapist would say no.
Nora Laredo writes, these gymnastics are the process of making fascism acceptable. It happens when the day ends, Trump is crowned president amid a day of red flags and fascist salutes, and Canadian media report that Canadian officials have sighed a sigh of relief. There were no tariffs that were promised. As if our closest neighbor becoming an out-and-out active fascist isn't the highest level emergency for us. We have to keep calibrating. It requires active work within ourselves to remember what you believe in when sometimes it feels like the air we breathe is full of propaganda. Words like terrorism and extremism are morphing before our eyes, with folks demonstrating at Tesla dealerships being called homegrown terrorists, and of course there's talk of them being the next to be sent to the concentration camps. In his book On Tyranny, Timothy Snyder suggests writing a letter to yourself about what's important right now, and then checking it frequently to see if you're changing. Quote, even if you're a saint, you'll feel that tug to go along with the tide and obey in advance. We need to talk about this with other people and check in with them again and again. People will adapt and not notice. Corporations, academic institutions, and professional organizations are currently bending the knee to Trump in astonishing numbers. Individuals do not need to follow suit. Something I've heard going around lately is that the opposite of complying in advance is fuck you, make me. And I think that we should all adopt a fuck you, make me attitude when it comes to things that curtail yours or others' freedoms.
Absolutely.
So those are the big important 4. This is going to turn into a gem segment because now we're going to go into a little bit of risk assessment and then like a bingo card of small actions that you can take. So risks. Thinking about and knowing what you're willing to risk in advance is a great tool for maintaining your boundaries. You can decide that you are going to leave the rally as soon as the vibes feel a little bit weird. You can decide to get street medic training so that if something goes down, you can rush in and help. You can stick to behind the scenes organizing, or you can chain your neck to a plow. You can prioritize your own survival. That is very much allowed. Margaret Killjoy writes, this is not to say that your risk level should not include more serious action. It's just that it should be a conscious choice. And as a general rule, don't break any felonious laws with anyone you haven't known for years, and don't break any felonious laws your first couple years in the movement anyway. It's better to know what you're risking and what you're risking it for in a way that is hard to know without the context of time involved in the movement. And for some of that additional context, law enforcement infiltrating the movement have a history of encouraging newbies to do things like arson and property damage and entrap people in that way. So that is why it is very important not to break any big laws with people that you have not known for a long time.
Yep. I don't know if anybody read the 404 Media article about the company that is making, they're shopping this product around to intelligence agencies and police services and ICE. Basically what it does is it makes a whole bunch of fake profiles using generative AI of radicals, etc., and then tries to use them to entrap people online. And they'll move between Discord and Telegram and Twitter and all of these spaces.
Great.
Yeah.
Another excellent use for AI.
Hard to see the cop shoes online.
All right. What to do bingo. First up, some easy entries. Make art. Make posters, make memes, make clothing that gives you gender euphoria, make collages, make zines. We need art if we're going to survive any of this upcoming stuff. We're always going to need art. Controversial one. Vote. Just got finished with that this weekend here in Canada. Lauren and I managed to live in a riding that got one of the highest vote turnouts in Canada.
Nice.
And ended up kicking out the Conservative in favor of an emergency room doctor. So hooray.
Still liberal, but we're on a bus stop.
Yeah. I mean, a year ago, we thought that we were going to be in total despair at this point. So although we are still under a center-right government, it feels like there's hope. So yeah, vote.
We dodged the worst of the bullets?
Yeah.
There's still bullets, but there's fewer.
Hit a kidney, but we've got 2 kidneys, you know. What bilateral symmetry is for.
Do the public transit thing when it comes to voting. We're trying to get closer to our destination. We're not going to get all the way there.
And don't let your politics, obviously, this is the whole segment that Ashlyn is doing, but vote, but don't let that be the extent of your politics.
Yeah. Pick something else on the list if that's going to be your one action.
Yeah.
Do a stretch goal.
Yeah, especially here in Canada, we don't vote on everything or all that often. So
here's the one that I'm having the most difficulty with on an ongoing basis. Protect yourself by shrinking your digital footprint. Look into end-to-end encrypted messaging services and email. Don't tell any form of social media anything you wouldn't want on the front page of Reddit or read to your mother. Communicate and organize in person when you can. And don't talk about Fight Club. As a bonus in the sort of protecting yourself category, masking not only protects yourself and other people, it also acts as a visible marker to others that you take community health seriously. So there was a whole bunch of different movements over the last few bits, like the safety pin thing or whatever. Those are empty symbols, and they're fine. They can help you find people who might not suck as much in a crowd. But a mask is an action that you are taking and a choice that you are making for the collective good. Lauren and I went down to the legislature earlier this week to speak in support of adding gender expression to the Manitoba Human Rights Code. And plenty of transphobes showed up to spew their garbage views and talk about how respecting people's pronouns goes against the teachings of Christ, etc. And the difference in the crowds were stark in more than one way, but by far the biggest difference was that the pro-gender expression folks were like 50-50 on masking, and the transphobes, they had zero masks in evidence. So if you want a way to show people that you're likely to defend them from tyranny, I can't think of too many better options. There's another entry. Oh, did you want to go?
A legal situation in some jurisdictions is complicated, but masks can also serve additional purposes when in a heavily surveilled area.
For sure. Helps with the whole facial recognition bullshit, too. Or just do the Juggalo makeup thing on top of a mask. Fun times. Always keep learning. The fact that you are listening to this podcast probably indicates that you got that one down. If you were listening to a bunch of nerds talk about various nerdy things every month, you're probably interested in learning new things. But it's harder to pull the same lies and manipulation when people know their history. So if you listen to podcasts or YouTube videos, read books, consume media about how these regimes have been overthrown before, it can really help out with hope, but also tactics. Saying something, obviously extremely important. If you stay silent or nod along, it lets the bigots think that you're on their side. If they aren't challenged on their terrible ideas, they will spread them like a contagion. All right, next level. Supporting independent media is going to be one way for us to know what is even going on in politics. Investigative journalism takes serious cash, and a subscription can inform you while funding future freedom. If you want to fund this podcast, you can find our links at lueepodcast.com. I think that sex ed programs are going to be a huge part of keeping people informed. Talked before about the Our Whole Lives program at the UU Church that I think is the best thing that they do. Teaching kids from 3 to 99 about their bodies and about consent and that trans people are real. Like, I think we just need to keep doing more of that. Another entry on the bingo card that I practice frequently, try feeding somebody. You could ask a neighbor if they could use a plate once a week. You could go volunteer at a soup kitchen. There are hundreds of ways to feed people in your community and in other communities. Try going to events. Winnipeg in particular has so many like neighborhood festivals that are great for getting to know people that are like physically near you. First Fridays in the Exchange are full of like cool little nerdy artsy things, and like nerdy artsy people tend not to be right-wing weirdos. There are some. But you know, if you're trying to find where the hippies are in your town, Winnipeg could do worse. There's pretty much always a rally or a protest to attend. You can gather with friends to sing show tunes around a fire. And finding your people is a distinction from getting to know your neighbors. Finding your people means like finding the people that are your D&D nerds, your poets or musicians or people who are super into spreadsheets. Like whatever your thing is, you gotta find some other people that are into that thing and spend some time with them on a regular basis. It's good for you. Here's another hard one. We're going to de-escalate all conflict that isn't with the enemy. It Leftists are very famous for fighting with one another. It is critical right now that we figure out what we have in common and form coalitions of people who don't have exactly the same solution in mind, but know that the status quo is not acceptable.
That's why our kids are always fighting.
Yeah.
You're just raising good little leftists who think for themselves.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
No.
At least one of them was like right up fascism alley, I'm pretty sure. I want to dominate.
8-year-olds be like that.
Yeah.
Which is part of the point. If you don't mature past the mental age of 8 as a society, you end up as fascists.
Unfortunately, the de-escalating all conflict that isn't with the enemy means that we have to offer an off-ramp for people who are currently on the right wing.
Yeah.
We need to offer people the chance to de-radicalize away from fascism. It's not to say we need to be nice to our enemies, but we need to make it clear that they have the option of no longer being our enemies.
Yeah.
I can't talk to you right now. I will talk to you again when you've re-examined your views and you reach out. Thanks, Grandma.
All right, so this next category of things are stuff that like sounds good in theory to most people, but acting on them requires effort or practice or social capital, and so it's really hard for a lot of people to actually put them into practice. So I've labeled this category, ugh. First up, if we don't want to be led by folks who have been credibly and repeatedly accused of horrific crimes, we've got to stop pretending to be friends with similar people. Do you know somebody who has been accused of some sort of sexual assault and you think, he's never done that to me. He seems like such a good guy. There's no way. Maybe you should examine those thoughts. Don't be friends with unrepentant abusers. Let them go to therapy until they have had a few epiphanies and then proceed with caution. Maybe. Next up, obviously, the current wave of attacks on trans folks is intensifying. If you are a churchgoer over 70, you might need reminders that they, them pronouns exist and you should learn them. People listening to this podcast probably don't have that problem. But in the same vein, if you could just cut it out with the ableist language, that would be cool. Because how do you feel about eugenics? Would you like to put everyone with autism into a wellness camp like RFK Jr. has suggested? Like, wow, we said some things about that guy, but he has come out swinging way worse than, wow.
I do appreciate how frequently, though, commenters that are not pro RFK Jr. are really pointing out the wormholes in his brain on this one. I just think it's real. I just like it. I just like it.
Those thoughts, they might be the worm.
You hate to be right.
Yep.
No. I love being right. It happens so infrequently.
Yeah. Maybe stop using words like stupid and crazy if you don't think that people with disabilities or differences deserve to be treated like subhumans. It's an option.
I went on a whole deep dive while doing this, the research for my segment, about the word delusional. And not just like the delulu that the kids are saying these days, but the actual what it means. Because I was going to call myself delusional. And I didn't, because it's an ableist word.
Yeah, it's a word with a very specific meaning, and you shouldn't use it as an insult. Yeah.
One way to prevent others from going along the eugenics road is by just talking about who you are. People are way more likely to have sympathy and appreciation for people of a particular demographic if they feel like they know someone who is of that demographic. So sometimes just telling people who you are is an action that you can take to fight fascism, which is pretty cool. And the last thing in the category is take care of yourself, not just others. You have to get rest. You have to get nutrition. Gemma's getting smacked.
Currently does few of these things.
I am fond of telling people, put on your own mask before you help somebody else, just like they do on the airplane.
These will be his dying words as he asphyxiates.
I am not very good at taking that advice.
Don't hypocrite yourself to death, Jim.
And note that everyone who is asking if they can do something for you or reaching out to ask you to take care of yourself is making a bid for connection. So reach back out and let them help you, because it's a win-win.
Ow!
This is helping, Jem.
More forceful means more love.
Laura is helping you.
Wait, you're going to get him confused because isn't that the stop talking signal as well?
No, that's up here.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That's also helping Jem usually.
I am very good at moderating this.
It's classical conditioning over here.
I love you.
All right, we're almost done. We're on the last page of bingo categories.
We're almost done Ashlyn's segment. We still have a Jem and Laura segment coming up.
We're almost done my segment.
I'll keep them quiet.
So have you ever considered unionizing your workplace? I sure wish I had.
I have. That's how I ended up with the Wobblies.
Yeah, so anybody can join the Wobblies, is my understanding, as long as you are a worker and not a boss.
Yes, you cannot have the power to hire or fire in a hierarchical organization.
Okay. You too can join a union, get your workplace started towards that path, something like that. Here are some more excellent words from Nora Laredo on the power of unions. Having the right to collectively bargain your working conditions isn't just good for employees, it's a bulwark against fascism. Through a union, workers' legal and democratic power balances the power that the bosses have. And this balancing act is what helps to keep fascism in check, especially when the bosses take over government. Without worker power, the bosses start to do some pretty nasty things. Things like working their workers' bodies into the ground, stealing their wages, shutting up factories, and throwing hundreds of people out of work, etc. Sidebar. Today, I read a story about how the wheelbarrow factory that Trump visited for the end of his first 100 days in office and his first term doesn't exist anymore because they have moved production overseas after 250 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, back to this quote.
I need to be reminded to rant at you about the union meeting that I had recently.
So when there is no union present, the power that the bosses have to make unilateral and harmful decisions is unchecked, leaving workers with very few tools to fight back. This has left only one option for many people: protest. Smaller protests outside of Tesla's storefronts, acts of vandalism, and mass rallies. But none of these have the same power as a general strike. Unions break glass in case of emergency option. A general strike is not a rally. The workers who are in the streets during a general strike are not working, and they commit to refusing to work until a demand is met. When workers en masse refuse to work, they stop the economy from functioning, forcing the government to change course. General strikes are routinely called in countries where organized workers oppose what a government is doing. Nigeria to France, Serbia to India, Greece to Hong Kong. Workers around the world understand that their most powerful action is to simply not go to work, and instead pour into the street. While some of Canada's union leadership seem to think that scoring election wins through the Liberals to stop Poilievre is all that we need to do right now, the reality is that fascism is at our front door as well, and no election is going to change that. Unions need to be wholly oriented toward the fascist threat and ready to pull the trigger with a general strike when necessary. And there have been plenty of other calls from many quarters for a general strike, and other prominent voices calling it things like the only plan that seems to have a whisper of hope.
What was your line? Party like it's 1919?
Let's party like it's 1919.
Winnipeg is very fond of banking on its reputation as the site of the largest general strike, I think, in the 20th century.
Yeah.
And we do have like a lot of proud labor history through
absolutely.
various means.
I've been to the Ukrainian Labor Temple.
Exactly, yeah.
But you can't keep cashing in on that history if you don't keep that history alive.
It's been 106 years. Let's get a new movement.
There's only so many trolley monuments that you can make. So in the meantime, get familiar with common alt-right and Nazi symbols like Lauren was talking about, and we should remove their symbols whenever we can. And we should also be doing our best to get back to a time where being a fascist in public was completely unacceptable. You gotta call out their Nazi salutes for what they are, bounce them from your establishments, make them at least fear the violence that they inflict upon others with their very presence. Make it a threat again that if you are a Nazi in public, it is the reasonable thing to do is to make you uncomfortable enough to leave through whatever means necessary. And finally and relatedly, you need to understand the difference between law and morality. It is morally correct to refuse to comply with an unjust law. And this goes out especially to anybody who might have the power to deny healthcare, sign an illegal order, detain somebody. You have to make a plan for how you're going to say no. Make a plan for when it becomes, for if or when it becomes illegal to love who you love, worship how you worship, express who you are in ways that don't harm anybody. Nora once again has a great summary for us. If you are looking for the shortest answer possible, we must stop this fascist wave by every means necessary. And the means abound. Renewing democracy, investing in public services and civil infrastructure that aren't pipelines, giving people what they need, refusing orders, breaking with common and acceptable logic and practicality, building an industrial policy that recovers Canada's sovereignty from the markets. We have handed Canadian sovereignty, including control of our markets and our democracy, to the markets. The markets are rewarding fascism. We don't have much time to do an about-face. We must break with the logic that our corporations cling to, which promises them year-over-year profits. We must force them to listen. How do we do this? Through general strikes, civil disobedience, and movement building. We use every single tool we have available to us to break the machine. We stand up to the ones who stand to profit the most, and we make their lives hell. This is where the complicatedness of life lies. This is difficult, but do you know what? Organizing a general strike is not difficult when the alternative is the fatality of fascism. Organizing within workspaces, building a democratic fight back is not difficult when the alternative is death. The only person who will tell you it can't be done is the person who actually benefits from the way that things are. Da, da, da.
That's great.
That's the second time I've heard this week. Still real good.
Yeah.
There was visuals with the other presentation, but
lots of really helpful and useful information there. And some of the things are, like, so many of those things are things that I think a lot of people wouldn't think of as fighting fascism.
Right.
Because they think of, well, that's just being neighborly, or that's having a project or a cause that I care about. Mm-hmm. And being able to link those two together to say, like, it's actually both. So you don't have to be an explicit, like, or they're like, I really don't want to be that kind of person, but I don't like fascist stuff, or I don't like Nazi shit or whatever. Then it's like, well, you don't have to be, like, if those aren't your people, that's okay. But these actions can still have that. Like, know that you can be doing good with these things.
You can give water to the people who are walking in the streets.
And it doesn't matter if it's against the law, it's still the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Community building is anti-fascist.
Yeah.
The big one that spoke to me, both on Sunday when you presented and then again today, is writing down what you stand for, writing that letter to yourself, and checking in with it.
Mm-hmm.
I was, as you were saying it here tonight, I was like, should we start a new segment where we ask our listeners at the top of each show to go, hey, have you checked your letter lately? Do you still have your same values, and are you living into your values?
And I think honestly this podcast serves as kind of that for us, because we are constantly putting our views on paper, as it were, and putting them out there, and we revisit them weirdly often.
I mean, we've been doing this for
15 years.
Is it 15? Was it 2010? It was 2010.
2010.
Wow. 15 years.
I thought we just did 10.
You'd think we'd have more than 3 listeners.
Thank you, loyal 3 listeners.
We love you. Please don't be fascist.
Yeah, I believe it was November 2010 was our first episode. Yeah. And I know that I have changed over that time. I've become more left-wing. I'm seeing how far that Overton window will go. And I know for a fact that all of us in this room have participated in illegal acts.
Together.
That were perfectly moral and, I would say, anti-fascist.
We renew our commitment to our illegality every day. Fuck you, make me.
And unless our website is incorrect, it was 2011.
The website is incorrect because we actually migrated hosts in early
After
2011.
A year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
2010 it is.
Easier to remember.
That's wild.
Like, I was born in a year that ends in 0, and it's so easy.
Yeah, we were on Libsyn, I think, at first, and then we moved to WordPress. Anyway, I would just like to note that the Wobblies, the industrial workers of the world that Ashlyn mentioned, the one big union, they were actually banned in Canada for decades because of their association with it's actually kind of before the real Red Scare started. It was in the lead up to no, it was just after the First World War, but it was in the context of a bunch of revolutions that had happened. And
you mean Widow was interning socialists before the...
Yes, exactly.
I have a whole ass reading about that, but it's another 8 minutes, so I'm going to cut it.
The maximum sentence for membership in the Wobblies was 5 years at one of the 24 internment camps. Yeah.
Which, to add insult to injury, once you were sent to one of these labor camps for people who were organizing against the Canadian government or whatever, they sent both like communists and socialists and fascists all to the same places. But the fascists were rich, so they would just pay off the guards and not have to do anything.
Uh-huh.
These are things I learned recently. Very upsetting.
So Laura and I are gonna talk a little bit about how fascism can intersect with healthcare. Both Laura and I work in healthcare, and how we can fight them. I want to kind of introduce our roles, and our listeners know us.
Probably.
So I'll just sort of introduce our context. I am a family medicine resident, so a new doctor doing my postgraduate training in family medicine. I'm about halfway through my residency, so I'll be hanging out my own shingle in 14 months or so. And Laura is currently a dietitian and studying to get her master's of social work.
Mm-hmm.
So I was originally, when I was thinking about talking about this, I was originally kind of focusing on the specific fascist tendencies we might see insert themselves into our legal system over the next few years, and things that we're seeing happen in the States, and the things that we as healthcare workers can expect to be called upon to do, and the ways that we can resist that. But Laura astutely pointed out that there are fascist tendencies that manifest in the health and wellness spheres already, and maybe we should talk about those. So maybe I'll ask Laura to mention a few of these, and I'm sure the rest of the panel can chime in.
Yeah. I'm really curious what you two are thinking as we bring up that point. But this is immediately where my reading went and where my own thoughts on things went. And one of the first things is the ever-increasing focus on healthism and emphasis on being as healthy as one can be, and that whole sphere that goes along with it, because it is, well, there's a lot of problems with it. Number one, it really creates that in-group and out-group part, and it creates the deserving healthy and undeserving unhealthy, which is really easy to say, well, these people are deserving, they get to go to the top, and these people, we should just ignore them and let them fend for themselves with wolves, I guess.
The Ubermensch philosophy.
I said that so many times when I was telling that to Jam yesterday. I was going to say it, but it really is. And it's not just like weird, Silicon Valley dudes that drink Soylent and want to live to 150.
But it is also that.
Oh, that is it. But it's not, they are the loudest and weirdest examples of the prevalence of all of this, like 20-step skin routine for whatever. This is part of it.
The lion diet?
I don't even know what this is, but that's going to be another podcast for another day, Lauren. But yes.
I just heard about that today.
This diet. Do not eat this food. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s tirades against like seed oils and processed foods and all red food dye or whatever it is. He's tirade. It's all of this, even if these individual things are not themselves fascist, it feeds into this pipeline of healthism and deservingness and ignores the structural factors that are carefully manipulated and controlled to keep classes in this way.
It kind of goes in two different directions. There's the obsession with a personal optimization and that Ubermensch thing, that like strong, pedigree that is very eugenicsy, which we'll get into again. But then there's also this obsession with this gospel of personal responsibility, and this idea that you have put in the work, you are healthy, and you see people saying, well, I don't need the flu shot. I'm healthy. I've put in the work. And they're not only endorsing this personal responsibility, I don't need this, they're refusing to acknowledge the society that they live in, and the fact that, I mean, first of all, being healthy won't stop you from getting the flu. Sorry, that's just not how that works. That's not how viruses work. It also refuses to acknowledge that we live in a community. We live in a society. And it is not about you being healthy. It is about us not being vectors to infect each other.
Mm-hmm. It's about getting to that herd immunity so that we don't have measles.
Or fascism.
When you started, the first thing that came to mind for me was the trope in the like health at every size and fat acceptance movements of good fatty, bad fatty. If a fat person is exercising and eating right and dieting and starving themselves, they're a good fatty because they don't want to be fat.
Yeah.
But if they're proud of themselves and eating a hamburger, then they're a bad fatty and they just should die. It's so common.
Yep, exactly. So again, you might be thinking, well, but does that really have to do with fascism? Like, again, maybe not specifically in that specific instance, but where are these things coming from? Like you were talking about, Ashlyn, where does this messaging come from? Why is it so important to you to be so focused on some of these things? Now, why do you start to feel like, well, they aren't exercising and I am, and therefore I deserve more healthcare than they do? Why do you start to think some of these things, my tax dollars should go for my healthcare and not their healthcare? Where do those ideas come from? This individualism. And it's very interesting because you might be saying, well, but fascism is about conformity. And this is about individualism. No, it's not. It's like, it's focused on focusing so heavily on your personal responsibility to your health and individualism, but everybody's supposed to do it in exactly the same way as prescribed by the states and the powers and the companies that control all of this messaging and the money and want to keep you under their thumb.
It's a selfish conformity.
It is a selfish conformity, and it is not, as Jem and Ashlyn and Lauren were all saying, like, as you were all saying, it is not community in that way, because it is not actually about engaging with one another as we are and supporting ourselves and having that diversity. It is about siloing ourselves and following the leader.
Community is non-hierarchical, right? It is flat. These kinds of fascist structures that we see are hierarchical. Any fascist community is atomized. There are individuals. There are family groups with the father at the head, and it builds up from there. These things all tend toward, these things that we're talking about and railing against, they tend toward this focus on atomization and individual responsibility. And they also, that good fatty, bad fatty that Ashlyn was mentioning, is one of many examples. We see this with disabled and racialized folks too, as an excuse for othering people, for saying, I'm deserving, they are not. This is the in-group, that is the out-group. And whenever you find yourself doing in-group, out-group stuff, you're sliding down that slope toward fascism.
Except if the outgroup is the fascist you're kicking out of your... Always right to punch a fascist.
Back to the tolerance of paradox. Oof, paradox of tolerance.
We will tolerate paradoxes. That's okay.
I have a good paradox myself.
We also do see, like if we look at history, we see cases clear as day where the medical establishment was directly contributing to fascist action involved in residential schools.
Fun fact, both of my professions actively working towards keeping residential schools going and the atrocities that happened there. Real cool. Love that.
Yep. We, as I mentioned briefly in my valedictory address last year, the Saskatchewan doctors' strike, where when Tommy Douglas was bringing in single-payer healthcare in Saskatchewan, all of the doctors went on strike because they feared that, I mean, not all of the doctors, but there was a large strike of doctors because they feared that in a single-payer system, they would not have as much money for themselves. They could afford healthcare. Lots of people couldn't, and they didn't want to share. Unfortunately, medicine is quite hierarchical still, but some of us are trying to change that. We just had an election, as Ashlyn mentioned. Thankfully, we, for now, don't have a conservative government here in Canada. That is big C, conservative. We just barely elected a liberal minority government, which I would argue is small c conservative, center-right, as Ashlyn said.
They're a little farther right than center. I call the NDP center-right now.
It of course depends on the orientation of your personal Overton window. But we do still see things happening in the United States, things happening in the UK that might eventually make their ways over here that intersect with healthcare. What are some of those things that people are worried about?
The vote in the UK to invalidate trans women?
Uh-huh. We, in the United States, we're seeing a lot of barriers being erected for medical and surgical transition, and even for puberty blockers for minors.
There's a barrier for surgical transition in the one clinic that does bottom surgery in Canada. You have to be of a normal or below BMI before they will even consider you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is not uncommon for surgical interventions. We are seeing attacks on safe consumption sites. We are seeing, obviously, in the United States, there are tremendous barriers to access to abortion care.
Major attacks in Canada on our unhoused or underhoused populations as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We're favoring institutionalization, incarceration over anything. Anything, really.
Despite the fact that there is copious evidence that giving people places to live and giving them food is not only far more effective, it is also cheaper.
Yeah, it costs less. We already solved this like years ago on our Solving Homelessness episode.
Come on.
Give people food and homes.
This is there are things, yes, these things are well known, and it's just it is a choice to ignore them.
I'm going to clamp down my urge to go on a rant about the way the Conservative government for a decade dealt with nurses union here and resulted in refusal to increase wages, resulted in ballooning healthcare costs for a variety of reasons because they wouldn't negotiate in good faith with the union, etc. We are seeing RFK down south float the idea of registries of people with autism and potentially other conditions. We have, and in some cases continue to see, forced sterilization of the disabled, the infirm, Indigenous folks.
Trans people,
yeah. So some of these are things that we're seeing right now elsewhere. Some of these are things that we've seen historically. Some of these are things that we are going to likely see rear their heads again in the future.
I argue with the elsewhere, because we're seeing them a lot here too.
Sure, yeah. When faced with a legal imposition into medical care, whether it's an injunction against medical care or the enforcement of some sort of care that would be immoral or contrary to the ethical principles of your particular practice, a provider is faced with two options, right? To comply or to refuse. Many seem to favor compliance. And the argument that I see to paint it in the rosiest possible light is that if you refuse to carry out an authoritarian order, or if you continue carrying out your ethical duty in the face of an order to the contrary, you're risking not only your own livelihood, but also your future ability to help others, right? If you are a doctor who is performing abortions and abortion has been made illegal, if you continue to perform abortions, if you continue to provide that care, then your license could be suspended or you could be jailed and you won't be able to help other people.
Or your clinic could be bombed.
Sure.
Or you could give the valedictory address at the at Western University.
But taking the longer view, capitulation to an unjust law serves to reinforce it. History is full of unjust laws, and those who used the excuse of those unjust laws to remain comfortable and to follow them and to not make waves. As healthcare providers, we have the luxury to decide whether or not to comply. The subjects of these rules, whether they're trans people, pregnant people, indigenous patients, disabled people, they're afforded no such luxury. When we're discussing these laws, they're not subjects, they're objects, right? We owe more to our patients. We owe them moral courage. We owe them solidarity. We owe each other our conscientious objection. We owe them not only our voice, we need to speak up, we need to advocate, but we also owe them our actions. I would say they can't jail us all. Alas, that isn't true. But in so doing, they reveal themselves and they give us a megaphone. Just following orders was never an adequate excuse. And the argument for compliance can be used to justify not only maintaining the ugly status quo, but can be used ultimately to justify any atrocity, right? It boils down to, I was just following orders.
Yeah. Well, right? And also that, as it is with everything, if you are presently in the in-group or something and you think, well, it doesn't apply to me, it will eventually apply to you personally. That's the way that these types of regimes work. They are coming for everyone. So if they come for anyone, they will come for you too. So treat it as though you are currently being come for. Like if that's the only way you can wrap your head around it, they will, because they always do. So if you're a privileged healthcare worker right now and you're like, I'm protected, you won't be. You won't be.
Yeah. And we're already pretty far down the poem at this point, so.
Yes, we are indeed. As Ashlyn said, you do not comply in advance. And think hard about whether you comply at all. A lot of us who work in healthcare are in fairly privileged positions. We have social capital. We have political capital. And that's not worth a fucking thing unless you spend it.
Mm-hmm. It's no good in the bank.
Nope.
So what can we do? I've talked about compliance. We can all prepare. Some of us have already been prepared for the weaponization of professionalism complaints as a way of defending the status quo. We can continue to provide just ethical care, regardless of the legality of that care, and knowing that we may be subject to professional or legal censure, but also recognizing that we have significant resources at our disposal for legal defense. And we have the solidarity of our comrades. And we need to continue, of course, using our voices. I would like to ask the rest of the panel, as non-healthcare workers, and potentially as people who are targets of some of these things that we're seeing, what do you need from your healthcare workers?
I always appreciate when my healthcare workers do things like, we're going to do it this way because we need to convince the system that we have followed the steps. For example, my doctor at one point, this is many years ago, was like, I think that this medication will work for you, but pharmacare or your insurance or whatever won't cover it unless you try this one first. So I'm going to prescribe this to you for a month. You have to fill it. You don't have to take it.
I know exactly which medication you're talking about. And I have had similar conversations.
So I like when they are willing to let me in on their sort of like, here's how we're going to work with the system for us kind of thing.
For anyone who is watching The Pit, I clocked what I felt was a very good ethical moment that involved a healthcare professional lying repeatedly and justifying that lie. What was it, episode 4? With the ultrasound? Bravo, Dr. Robbie.
Personally, I would like to take that even a step back. And for healthcare workers who are working with patients in the field to keep current with the research. Ashlyn did a whole segment about the nil by mouth. We've talked about BMI. Laura, you have talked about so much in the nutrition profession that it just astounds me that there are people who, like, do they no longer have professional curiosity when they get to a certain point, and to a point to keep bettering themselves in their field and keep taking care of their patients. That's really what I want, is for people to understand that best practices change.
Yeah. And as somebody entering a generalist field, it is overwhelming how much there is to know and how much there is to keep up with. And so you need, at the very least, some intellectual humility.
And well, that's what you can say. I don't know. Let me go look for that.
Let's go check the new guidelines.
And let's not look at the...
I was say the same thing. Let's not Google it and read the AI summary, though.
God. I saw that happen in one of my academic sessions last month.
Yeah, that happened to Ashlyn personally, listeners. Yeah. I'm not sure if we mentioned it.
I think we did.
Yeah, I think you must have. I've heard the story a few times. And
ridiculous.
It's still like,
yeah.
Probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me in healthcare, and there's a low bar.
I have to keep current in my profession, and I don't have a freaking license. If I don't keep current, things get bad. If I was in charge of somebody's health, well, please don't put me in charge of somebody's health. But I would do my best to keep current. Like, doctors fighting against safe injection sites is just... I'm not going to say what's come to my mind because we've already said the F word a couple times tonight.
I think that's a good example, though, of where are your morals at? What are you most concerned with? And are you concerned about things like the doctor's strike, that I want to keep my clout, or I don't want others to have any power or something? Or is it that, or is that you've become entwined with the system? Like, many of us have to work in the system for whatever reason. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with or comply in advance with it, but the system is as it is, and ideally you can work to change it. But why is your outrage about, where does your outrage come from when it comes to being like, this could save lives? Why are you mad that we're just giving people food for free?
Right?
What makes you mad about it? And if it's that, well, I had to pay for mine and it costs a lot of money, why does it cost so much money? Who made that choice? And so on and so forth. So asking yourself, so I think that's like, why are you so against so much of this stuff? And where does that come from? And is that really, like, maybe that is your moral belief, but also could that be coming from elsewhere?
Yeah. Poverty is a policy choice. Starvation is a policy choice. Homelessness is a policy choice. The spread of communicable disease is a policy choice.
RFK is a policy choice.
We have a duty to advocate for public health, and therefore we have a duty to advocate for a functional social safety net at the barest minimum. We have, even those of us who don't work directly in public health, our words carry a lot of weight when it comes to public health.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse. And we have great power. Insert Ben Parker quote here. And there may be, I'm sure there are examples aplenty where, even outside of healthcare, people can fight unjust rules in their own workplace. I mean, I think I told the story before from when I was in adolescent psych, and We had some trans patients, and they kept getting their dead names written in full on the big board. And one of the residents and I made a big stink. And we were told by the charge nurse that, well, that's the policy. We need their full legal name there to prevent medication errors, to prevent misidentification, and it's the policy. We provided a lot of alternatives, and eventually that addressed the actual concerns, and eventually they just fell back on, well, it's the policy. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, here is the evidence that policy will result in harm.
The policy is bad.
The policy is wrong, and we are not going to comply with a bad policy.
Do you know what my most favorite word is in those situations? Why? That's the policy. Well, why? Well, because it is. Well, why?
Do the 3-year-old approach.
That's what I do at work.
Yeah. Well, like, so she would not have an answer to that because she didn't make the policy and doesn't have control over the policy, but she does have control over whether she follows it. And
well, why?
Worse, it is worth getting in trouble to do the right thing.
Agreed.
Have I ever told you all about my favorite 20th century poem?
I don't know.
Okay, this is homework for our listeners. Go read the poem Prayer Before Birth by Louis MacNeice about the rise of fascism before, during, and after the Second World War. Still written by a white guy in the mid-20th century, but it's pretty powerful.
Speaking of nice.
I'll go, I guess. So going to the legislature to sit in a very echoey rotunda in the overflow and watch a lot of transphobes talks was really bad. It really sucked. But having community there, seeing a whole bunch of people that I basically knew from random gay Facebook groups.
I know them from gay.
Yeah. Like all just congregated there to be there to talk because we didn't want to be outnumbered by the transphobes felt really good. It felt nice to see everybody. Because we were in the overflow, we didn't have to be as collected as they were in the actual hearing room. And so when they finally had some people making good points, we started snapping for good points and good speakers. Holy shit, that pissed off the transphobes.
Snapping.
But they had been making a similar amount of noise during the other talks, so they had no leg to stand on. It was quite fun. Yeah, the solidarity feels of being there and being in community and standing up for what we believe in were worth the garbage.
And the fact that our legislative assembly allows us that privilege, and we should take advantage of it.
Yeah, we are apparently one of the only provinces in Canada to allow any private citizen to just sign up and talk to the committee, which leads to
for better or
75
for worse,
people signed up to give their 10-minute talk and 5-minute question period.
No, we need to bring back the long hook and the horn and just like yank them.
Right, they were very good at cutting people off who went too long.
Who's in charge of the hook, Laura?
Right?
Me.
Why?
Because
she comes out for authoritarianism after all.
So solidarity and going to participate in government are my something nice.
For the record, it was going to be a totally nonpartisan, time-based thing. You get 2 minutes. You can say whatever you want, but after 2 minutes, you're out.
I know. I'm just being
I know. I'm just being very clear.
Yes.
I'm allowing them to be terrible.
We are determined and judicious in our language and our choice of it.
Laura is paraphrasing Anatole France, who
am I
once
I am.
said
I thought she was paraphrasing the Gong Show.
The law, in its majestic equality, forbids the rich and poor alike to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal bread.
Fair enough. Ugh.
I'm so well
just
read.
Following the rules.
They hang people for that.
Oh, God.
What's your something nice, Laura?
Oh, I don't wanna. I don't.
Hanging Nazis?
Oh, no. I mean, no. What is my something nice? I am done school right now for the next until September, and that is nice. I have so much more time all of a sudden. So, yeah. That's just it. That's my something nice.
How's your seedlings?
Oh, I didn't start any seedlings. Are you kidding me? Yeah, no.
It's been a busy time.
This term's been kind of hellish, and the term before that was also. So, nope. I bought seedlings from my kids' school fundraiser. That's what I do.
That is you supporting a small group to help children and everything. So
exactly, and it's a local. It's like a Manitoba. I mean, they're all Manitoba nurseries, but still, they do that. So anyway,
supporting small businesses and a school.
There we go.
I've got some bonus tomatoes.
I'll probably take them.
We almost got away without them last night.
Is borscht or something nice?
No, being done school was, but borscht just is like my favorite soup. It is the best soup.
What's your something nice, Jim?
So last episode, I briefly mentioned the video game Grun, a little gardening game. Pretty much done with that. It did turn out to be really excellent. I think I just started it. It's kind of like Outer Wilds with less existential dread and more creepy lawn gnomes. I enjoyed it quite a lot. And now I'm getting into Blueprints. Highly recommend for anyone who is a fan of puzzles, exploration.
Is that spelled with a TS or a CE?
Yes. Though if you're searching it on Steam, you'll want to search for CE. But yes, that is intentional. Very fun, very good, very deep rabbit hole of a game, akin to Outer Wilds in some respects. And fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds lovely.
I don't have a something nice. I have a someone good.
Aww.
I just wanted to raise up Ashlyn for all the hard work that they've been doing.
That doesn't count. You have to pick your own thing. You don't get to talk about me.
I just think you're the bee's knees, okay? And I know that I've been causing you a lot of trouble lately, and I think you're wonderful.
I still think you're cheating.
I haven't had sex with anybody that hasn't been you in years. And on that note, good night, everyone.
Lauren.
At something nice. We're cheating at something nice.
All right, I did start my new job as of Thursday last week.
Woo!
Yay.
Hopefully that will make me less of a trial to live with as we get into it. It looks like it's going to be something that's more up my alley, so watch this space.
That's excellent. That's very good.
I did have to switch unions, which is a little scary after 16 years.
Ooh, yeah.
Switched away from CUPE, which is like anathema in Manitoba. Just switch from CUPE.
You an MGEU now?
No.
No?
AMC. It's
I've never heard of that one.
hydro only.
Oh.
It's an internal union for... It's not great, but it is still a collective bargaining unit for higher non-management and lower middle management.
Okay.
Cool. I said with the Wobblies website up on my phone going, yeah, it's time. And because I reached out to my union, and this union does not have shop stewards. Because it's clerical. So, yeah, that's it.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for joining me, everyone. I guess that's my line tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm glad you got another round of everybody can listen to Ashlyn's excellent research.
Community building is anti-fascism, is the main thrust of what I want to get through here. And the quote from Margaret Killjoy that I started and ended my presentation with this Sunday is, the quickest way to sum all of this up is to say, think about what's wrong and think about what you're good at, then get together with other people and apply what you're good at to stopping what's wrong.
Nice. I like
there you go.
Good night, everybody.
I say it without hyperbole. Best sermon I've ever heard.
Aw. It was all 3 sermons that I have given previously wrapped up in a trench coat.
All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Show notes and references for all of our episodes are available at lueepodcast.com, where you can also find links to donate or get in touch. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is with a review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you found us, or by sharing this episode with a friend.
Life. Don't talk to me about life.
So this Wikipedia article, I got through totalitarianist, and I can't get through Wikipedia.
You had one. You got one chance. That's it. And after that,
yeah. I just wanted to double check because I feel like this is something you're going to think about later. Fascist does not have a glottal stop in it. The t is not a glottal.
No, that it's the glottal is in the middle of the word, but it's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not a glottal stop. So we'll just say, we'll go back to that to put it in, and the hard stop at the end if you say fascist, which makes it a hard and biting insult. We'll go from there. Thank you. We heard a lot of them at the legislator last week. For symbol...
The legislator?
The legislator. That's where the legislates work.